Alright, today we're going to go over the study guide for sections 1.1, 1.2. It's all over graphing quadratic functions. And it's in various forms. There's going to be 3 forms. So you have 3 forms. Standard form, vertex form, and intercept form. This is the hint sheet that you'll have on your quiz. And remember, standard form has no parentheses. There's no parentheses here. Alright. Step 1, find A, B, and C. A is always in front of the x squared, so you find the x squared, and right in front of it's A. B, you find the x, right in front of it is B. And then C is always the number that doesn't have a letter with it. Then you're going to use this formula. It's called the vertex formula. You have to use this. It's really important to use those parentheses on the bottom so it doesn't make a mistake. Then you're going to make an XY chart. If you want to use the 5-point XY chart, that's okay. You can use the 5-point XY chart. Most of the time I'm probably going to use the 3-point XY chart. This is a little bit faster. That's when you have to have the axis of symmetry, and we'll talk about that in vertex form. Vertex form has one set of parentheses. It's a set of parentheses. It's got to have a little 2 there. All right? It has A, H, and K. A is in front of the parentheses. Remember, A can't be 0. A can never be 0 in any of these. So if you don't see an A, it's automatically 1. H is hanging out inside the parentheses. So remember, we say if somebody's hanging out with their x, we don't trust them, so you always change the sign of H. If H is negative in the original problem, it's positive in step 1. If it's positive in the original problem, it's negative in step 1. In K, we trust K because they're not hanging out with their x, so you always keep K the same sign. Step 2 is really easy. They give you the vertex. Whatever you have, that's your vertex right there. Then you put a dotted line through the middle, and then you make an XY chart. You add 1 to H, you add another one to H, and those are your 3 points. Or you could subtract 1. You use the dotted line to help you reflect. Intercept form has 2 sets of parentheses. All right? A, P, and Q. A is always outside the parentheses. If you don't see anything, it's automatically 1. P and Q, they're both inside the parentheses, so you change their signs. Whatever you see, you write the opposite of. You use the vertex formula. This will be the x value of your vertex. Remember, those parentheses on the top are very important. If you forget them, it's going to make a mistake. You'll make an XY chart. P and Q, they're intercepts, so they're automatically 0. And then you just do P plus Q over 2. Make sure your graph is always a U or an upside down U. All right? That's it. Number 1 is f of x equals negative 2x squared. Remember, f of x is just a fancy way to say y. So if you don't like that f of x, you can just scribble it out and write y. If that makes you feel better, it doesn't really matter. Step 1, you find A, B, and C. I look at the x squared. That tells me that A is negative 2. There is no x, so B is 0. There is no C, so B is 0. Or C is 0. Now, I go to step 2. Step 2 says use x equals the opposite of B all over 2A. Remember, that's in parentheses. So I say the opposite is 0 all over 2 times negative 2. And notice there's 2 sets of parentheses on the bottom. All right? If you plug in your calculator, you should get 0. This is the middle of my XY chart, or it's the beginning if you're using the shortened version. So I'm going to use the short version because I'm kind of lazy. I put 0 here. I just add 1. I add another. I plug in 0 to the original problem. So I say y equals negative 2 times 0 squared. I get 0. Plug in 1. Y equals negative 2, and then 1 squared. You do 1 squared first to get 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. So negative 2 goes there. Then I have y equals negative 2. Instead of x, you put 2 squared. 2 squared is 4. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. Now, I go over 0, 0. I put a dot. That's my dotted line. I'm going to change colors. That's better. All right, 0, 0. It's just a coincidence that the dotted line is on the y-axis. That's not always the case. I go over 1. I go down 2. Put a dot. I'm going to reflect this over. So I'm 1 block away from my dotted line. So I go 1 block away, put a dot. 2, negative 8. Go over 2, down to 8. I'm 2 blocks away, so I go 2 blocks away, put another dot. That's the reflection part. There's my U. Remember, it's supposed to be a U. And that's it. You're done. Number 2, y is equal to 1/3 x squared. So step 1, I find A, B, and C. A is 1/3. B is equal to 0. C is equal to 0. Plug it into the vertex formula. So I say x equals the opposite of B all over 2A. Remember, the bottom's in parentheses. So I have negative 0 all over, in parentheses, 2 times 1/3. I get 0. Make my XY chart. 0, 1, and 2. Or maybe you don't like fractions, so you do 0, 3, and 6, because there's a 3 on the bottom. Multiples of 3 won't give you fractions, but I don't really care about fractions, so I'm going to plug in 0. I say y equals 1/3. Instead of x, I put 0, so I get 0. 0, 0 is my first point. There's a dot, and remember, my dotted line always goes through the vertex. It always goes through the first point. Plug in 1. Y equals 1/3. Instead of x, I put 1 squared, so I just get 1/3. Do the same thing. Y equals 1/3. Instead of x, I put 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 times a third was y equal 1 1/3, or 4/3. So I'm going to change my scale to go by thirds. So every 3 blocks, I put a big dash and say that's 1. So these are going by thirds. Makes it really easy to graph this. 0, 0 stays the same. I go over 1, up 1/3. That's 1 dot right there. Go over 2, up 4/3. See, it's really easy to find if you make it go by thirds. Reflect it over, boom. Reflect it over, boom. And there we go. We got our graph. And that's it. All right, number 3, we have y equals 3/4 x squared minus 5. So step 1, I find a, which is 3/4. B, which is 0, because even though there's a -5 there, it doesn't have an x with it. So that's not B. That's actually C is -5. Step 2, I say x equals the opposite of B all over 2a. I have the opposite of 0, which is 0, all over 2 times 3/4. Remember, you do the bottom in an extra set of parentheses. So I get 0 over anything is just 0. Make my xy chart. I pick 0, 1, and 2. Plug in 0 to this problem, so I have y equals 3/4. Instead of x, I put 0 squared minus 5. I get y equals -5. Now I plug in 1. Y equals 3/4. 1 squared minus 5. 1 squared is 1 times 3/4 is 3/4 minus 5 is -4 1/4, or -4.25. Now I plug in 2. Y equals 3/4. 2 squared minus 5. 2 squared is 4. 4 times 3/4 is 3. 3 minus 5 is -2. If you don't like this, if you don't like that fraction, you can always put 4 right here. Because it's a 4 on the bottom, more than likely it's not going to give me a fraction answer. So if you put 4 in, you will get 7, but I'm not going to, it doesn't really matter. So I go 0, -5. This is my dotted line. Remember, it has to be a dotted line because it's not part of your graph. I go 2, -2. I go 4, 7. If you want to put 1 and -4 and a fourth, you can do that. There's -4 and a fourth is like right there. Reflect it over. Reflect them over. Reflect them over. Now make my U. And we're done. That's it for number 3. Alright, number 4. G of x equals -x squared plus 2. Remember, if you don't like that g of x, just cross it out and put a y there. A is -1. Because although we don't see anything, there's still a number there. B is 0, and C is 2. X equals the opposite of B over 2A. Remember, the bottom's in an extra set of parentheses. I get 0 all over 2 times -1, which is 0. Make my xy chart. 0, 1, and 2. I plug in 0. I get y equals -0 squared plus 2. I get +2. Y equals, instead of x, I put 1. -1 squared plus 2. 1 squared is 1. That's -1, so I get +1. Now I plug in 2. Y equals negative. Instead of x, I put 2 squared plus 2. Now, these parentheses are really important. It forces you to make sure you get the right answer with the signs. 2 squared is 4, then it's -4, plus 2 is -2. So I go 0, 2, put a dot. There's my dotted line going through 0. It's just a coincidence these are going through the middle every time. Actually, it's because there's no B. Go over 1, up 1. Go right 2, down 2. going to reflect them over, and I have an upside down u, which makes sense. Since a is less than 0, I knew right away I was going to have an upside down u. So that's just a good self-check. All right, that's it for 4. All right, number 5, we have y equals negative 4x squared plus 8x plus 2. So we have a is negative 4, b is 8, and c is 2. X equals the opposite of b all over 2a. Now this is where it's really important that we add that extra set of parentheses on the outside. I saw a lot of mistakes in the class over this. Negative 8 all over 2 times negative 4. A good way to avoid that mistake is just do the top and bottom separately. So the top stays negative 8, but I do 2 times negative 4 first. I get negative 8. Negative 8 over negative 8 is 1. Remember, this is that's the middle of your XY chart if you're using 5 points, or since I'm taking the shortcut, it's going to be the beginning. So 1 is first. And then I add 1, and I add 1. So I'm going to plug 1 into the original problem. So I say y equals negative 4. Instead of x, I put 1 squared plus 8 times 1 plus 2. 1 squared is 1 times negative 4 is negative 4. Negative 4 plus 8 is 4 plus 2 is 6. So 1, 6 is my first point. If you want to put your dotted line now, you totally can do that. Now I plug in 2. Y equals 4 times 2, negative 4 times 2 squared, plus 8 times 2, plus 2. 2 squared is 4, 4 times negative 4 is negative 16, negative 16 plus 16 is 0, so I get plus 2. Now I have to plug in 3. I get negative y equals negative 4 times 3 squared, plus 8 times 3, plus 2. 3 squared is 9. 9 times 4 is negative 36, plus 24, plus 2. I end up with negative 10. So, 1, 6. I go 2, 2. This is a good reason why you might want to wait till your XY chart is filled out before you make your before you graph 80 points, because I might want to change my scale to go by 2's on the y's. But I'm not going to, just because I'm going to go 3, and then there's 8, and I would say negative 10 is about right there. Reflect it over. Reflect it over. Oop, that's a bad spot. And now I make my U. Now remember, even though it's really skinny, it still has to be a U. It still has to be curled at the top. All right? And don't forget your arrows. A lot of people are forgetting their arrows. Okay, this goes down forever. And that's it for 5. All right, number 6, we have h of x equals x squared plus 2x plus 1. Remember, don't let that h of x trick you. If you don't like it, just cross it out and put y. A is 1, B is 2, C is 1. Right? X equals the opposite of B all over 2a. So I have the opposite of 2, so negative 2 all over 2 times 1. So I get negative 1. Make my XY chart. Either negative 1's in the middle or negative 1's your starting point. It doesn't matter which one you use it as. So I plug it in. Y equals negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 plus 1. I get 1 plus or minus 2 plus 1, which is 0. Now I'm going to plug in 0, or I just know it's C. Then I'm going to plug in 1. Y equals positive 1 squared plus 2 times positive 1 plus 1. I get 1 plus 2 plus 1 is 4. So I go negative 1, 0, put a dot. There's my dotted line because that's the first point, or that's the middle point if you're using the 5-point XY chart. 0, 1, 1, 4. Now I'm going to reflect. Make sure you're reflecting over the dotted line. Some people were reflecting over the wrong line and they weren't getting the right shape. That's it for 6. Alright, number 7. We have f of x equals x minus 3 squared. So since one set of parentheses, this is vertex form. So step 1, find A, H, and K. A is 1. Even though we don't see it, it's automatically 1. Because it can't be a 0 there and make everything disappear. It wouldn't work out right. H, it looks like it's going to be negative 3, but we always change it to a positive 3. Right? If it was positive 3 there, I would change it to negative 3. K is whatever is after the parentheses. There's nothing there, so K is just 0. Alright, the vertex is 3, 0. So I go over 3, 0. That's my dotted line. That's the first point of my XY chart. I add 1, I add 1. You could also subtract 1, it does not matter. So I plug in, I say y equals, instead of x, I put 4 minus 3 squared, which is 1. Now I plug in 5. 5 minus 3 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So I go 4, 1, put a dot. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. Reflect it over. Reflect it over. And that's it for number 7. Alright, number 8, we have y equals negative, inside the parentheses, x plus 3 squared plus 5. A is 1, h is negative 3, k is 5. So my vertex is at negative 3, 5. Put a dot there, there's my dotted line. Now, like I said, you might want to wait to graph this in case you need to change the scale, so you don't have to erase anything. Put my XY chart. And A is negative 1. I forgot that negative sign right there. So A should have been negative 1, not positive 1. Make my XY chart. I put negative 3. I'm going to add 1 to get negative 2, and add another 1 to get negative 1. So I write y equals negative, and it's positive 5 right there. Negative, instead of x, I put negative 2 plus 3 squared plus 5. Negative 2 plus 3 is 1. 1 squared is 1, so negative 1 plus 5 is 4. All right. Now I'm going to put in negative 1, so I get y equals negative 1 plus 3 squared plus 5. So 2 squared is 4. Negative 4 plus 5 is 1. Alright, so now I plot them. Negative 2 up to 4, put a dot. Negative 1 up to 1, put a dot. Reflect it over, and there's my points. It makes a nice U. Right? And now, guys, remember, I already knew that was going to be a upside down U because of the graph, right? Or because of the A. Alright, number 9, f of x equals negative 2, x minus 1 squared minus 5. Remember, if you don't like that f of x, you can just cross that off and put y. A is negative 2, h is positive 1, h is positive 1, I almost messed that up. K is negative 5. So remember, we change the one in the parentheses, we don't change the one outside of it. My vertex is 1, negative 5, so I make an XY chart. Positive 1, negative 5. I add 1, I add another 1. Those are my other points I'm going to pick. Plug it in. Y equals negative 2. Instead of x, I put 2 minus 1 squared minus 5. So I get 1 squared is 1 minus 2. That's minus 2. Minus 5 is minus 7. Now I'm going to plug in 3. I get y equals negative 2, and then 3 minus 1 squared minus 5. 3 minus 1 is 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8 minus 5. I get negative 13. So here I'm going to have to change my scales to go by 2. So I'm going to make my y's by 2. You have to tell me if you're going to change your scales. So like either write y's by 2, somewhere I can see it and it's really noticeable. Or if you're worried, just go 2. Just go 2, 4, 6. That looks hard. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, negative 2, negative 4, negative 6, negative 8, negative 10, negative 12. That's a good way to show me that you're changing the scale. I go 1 down to -5, that's right here. I still have a dotted line. I go 2, -7, so 2, -7. Oh, I put that 1, -5 in the wrong spot. So there's -2, then I put -5 in the wrong spot. And there's 2, -7. And then I'm going to go 3, -13, that's right here. I'm going to reflect it over, and there's my U. Remember, even though it's kind of skinny, it still has to be a U. And that's it for number 9. Number 10 says y equals x plus 3, x minus 3. It's got 2 sets of parentheses, so it's intercept form. Alright? So that means I have to say A, P, and Q, where A is 1 because I don't see anything outside the parentheses. P is -3 because I changed that sign. Q is +3 because I changed that sign. In this case, it didn't really matter if you messed up. Alright? Now I do the vertex formula. X equals, remember, P plus Q all over 2. So I have -3 plus 3 all over 2. Remember, put the top in parentheses so you don't make a mistake. You get 0 over 2, which is 0. So I make my XY chart. I put 0 in the middle. I put P above it, which is -3. I put Q below it, which is 3. I don't have to plug in P and Q. If you want to plug P and Q in, you will plug them in, you'll get 0. It's a good double check to see if you did P and Q right. Plug in 0. 0 plus 3 is 3 times 0 minus 3, which is -3, so I get -3 times 3, which is -9. So I have 0, -9, there's 8, there's -9. Remember, that's your dotted line, so everything should still be symmetrical. -3, 0, 3, 0. Remember, your graph must be a U. It cannot be a V. No V. So you've got to make a nice U. That's terrible. If you're afraid you can't make a U, pick more points to make it a U instead of a V. And that's it for 10. Alright, 11, same thing. 2 sets of parentheses means it's intercept form. So I say A is 3. P is -2. Remember, we changed that sign. Q is -6. Remember, we changed that sign because they're both inside the parentheses. Vertex formula, x equals, in parentheses, P plus Q all over 2. I get -2 plus -6 all over 2. I get -8 over 2, which is -4. Make my XY chart. I start with -2, 0. I end with -6, 0, because those are P and Q. I have -4, the only one I got to plug in. So I say y equals 3 times -4 plus 2, -4 minus, or plus 6. I end up with 3 times -2 times +2. 3 times -2 is -6 times 2 is -12. Now remember, this tells me it should be a U, and what you're going to see, it does turn into a U and not an upside down U. So I go left 4, and I'm going to change my scale. So I'm going to go ahead and change my scale. I'm going to go by 2s. -2, -4, -6, -8, -10, -12. See how I'm writing? I'm showing that I'm changing the scale. If you don't show that you're changing the scale, I don't know that you're changing the scale. So it's got to be something that tells me you're changing the scale. Something's got to tell me you're changing the scale. All right. -4 down to 12. There's a dot, and there's my dotted line. Remember, that's just to make sure everything's symmetrical. -2, 0, dot. -6, 0, dot. Notice both those dots are 2 dots from the 2 blocks from the dotted line, so that means they're on the right track. And there we go. There's our U. That's it for number 11. All right, number 12. We have f of x equals the opposite of x minus 4 times the quantity x plus 6. Remember, if you don't like that f of x, you can just cross it off and put y. Okay? Now, a is negative 1. Remember, if there's nothing there, there's automatically a 1, and there's a negative sign there. P is negative 4. Q is negative 6. Step 2, or positive 6. Step 2, I have x equals P plus Q all over 2. I get negative 4 plus 6 all over 2. I get 2 over 2, which is 1. So I make my XY chart. I do negative 4, 0, 1, 6, 0. I have to plug in 1. Y equals negative 1 minus 4, 1 plus 6. Get negative 3 times positive 7. So I get 21. So I have to change my scale. I'm going to make my scale go by 3s. So I'm going to go 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24. So the y's are by 3s. All right, make sure I just wrote it out and I made it really clear that the y's are by 3. Now I go 1 up to 21, put a dot a line. Negative 4. Put a dot. 6, put a dot. All right, I'm going to make my graph. CU. And that's it for 12. All right, max or min value. Max or min value. Look at A. If A is greater than 0, you have a U, which means you have a minimum. If A is less than 0, you have an upside down U, which means you have a max because it's an upside down U. All right? The value is the y part of the vertex. So basically, you're going to do steps 1 and 2. And part of 3. No graph. All right, that's it for max. All right, number 13, y equals negative 6x squared plus 1. So step 1, I find a, b, and c. It's standard form because there's no parentheses. So a is negative 6, b is 0, c is 0. That tells me right there, that negative 6 tells me I have a frowny face, which tells me I know at the end I'm going to have a max value. That's half your answer. The other half is actually finding the value. So you do step 2. X equals the opposite of b, all over 2a. X equals 0 all over 2 times negative 6, which is 0. This is not your max value. I have to plug that in. So it's like making your XY chart, except you only have 1 point, 0. I plug it in. 0 squared is 0 times negative 6 is 0 plus 1 is 1. That's your max value. So I put 1 right there. And that's it for 13. All right, 14. Same thing. Step 1, A is 2, B is 8, C is 7. A tells me, since it's CU, that I'm going to have a min value. All right, I do X equals the opposite of B, all over 2A. So I get negative 8 all over 2 times 2. Do not forget your parentheses. I get negative 8 over 4, which is negative 2. I have to plug negative 2 into my original problem because basically I'm making an XY chart with only 1 point. Not 0. Negative 2. So I plug negative 2 in. Y equals 2 times negative 2 squared plus 8 times negative 2 plus 7. So I get positive 8 minus 16 plus 7, which is negative 1. So negative 1 goes here. So guess what? That's my min value, negative 1. And your answer should say min value equals negative 1. All right? Finish the rest of this on another video. It won't take very long. It'll be really short of the next video.